guys, we are back for step 2. So I have my current supplies. I have some slip out here. I've got the tools ready over here. I also have a rolling pin and my bumpers, my wood slats here. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and get my clay out. And the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna leave my cylinder in here and I'm going to get out my extra clay that I had from last time, okay? Now, my clay here from last time is a little bit on the rougher side here. It's not as nice and soft and smooth as it was originally. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of work on smoothing out these edges, and this might require a bit of water just to make sure that it's nice and smooth, depending upon how dry your clay is. Okay, mine's a little bit dry. It's not crazy dry, so I can kind of smooth it out here with just my fingers for now. Okay, so I'm smoothing this out. And once I get, the main offenders, the main, kind of cracks and wrinkles smoothed out here, I'm going to go ahead and kind of help form it a little bit more into a ball. And so sometimes that means that maybe I'm pressing it here like this, okay? Sometimes rolling it around like this, or sometimes even rolling it on my surface here to kind of help smooth it out. Now, for me, I kind of had this oh, just kidding, it just went away. I had a spot that was having a hard time smoothing out, and so sometimes you might kind of tap it a little bit and then roll it out, okay? And one of the cracks that I had that I kind of had smoothed out has now turned into a bit of a Grand Canyon here. So I'm going to kind of smooth this out as well. Okay, so remember, crack is whack. Any cracks that you have, you want to get rid of them as quickly as possible. If I were to have left that and started working on the next step, there's a chance that I would have to redo that next step all over again because those cracks would mess me up. Okay, so I have this here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wood slats and I'm going to set them down next to it. Okay, and for this one, the shape isn't really a huge deal because we're going to end up cutting a circle for the bottom of our pot. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take my roller here and notice that this is really tall compared to this. Okay, so I might go ahead and just kind of flatten the edges a little bit. It makes it a little bit easier for me to start rolling it out, just like this. Okay, so it's a little flatter. And then I can go ahead and start rolling out. And remember, you don't want to press down. You're just rolling it back and forth this way. And I can kind of rotate this as I go. Okay, I can flip it over as I'm working through this. Okay, and we're going to continue rolling this out until it is level with my wood slats here. So I'm going to do that and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've rolled it out using my bumpers. Again, the whole time I'm not moving the bumpers out of the way to roll it out. I'm keeping them up here because it helps make sure that my clay, my slab that I'm rolling is a nice consistent size without getting too thin in areas. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set these to the side here. And I'm going to grab my cylinder from my container. One of the things I do want to show you, I do have some cracks going on here. I'm pretty sure that this is big enough that it's okay. I'm going to cut them off anyway. If you were concerned about it, you might go ahead and smooth out some of these cracks, but I think I'm going to be able to cut off most of it there. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my container out, and or my cylinder out of this, and whenever I pull this out, a couple of things. One, the little lines in my lid kind of made some indentions, okay? But it's nothing too terrible that I can't fix. And honestly, I think I might put this as my end that goes against the clay anyway. Okay, so I'm going to carefully take this out with both hands, and I want to make sure that I don't squish it whenever I pick it up. Okay, so I'm going to be very, very gentle as I take this out. Okay, and I'll set this down here. Now, whenever I was pulling this out, it did want to kind of stick in a couple areas on the bottom, so just be careful of that so you don't rip up your cylinder that you have. Okay, and like I said, I have a couple of indentions here from the lid, and instead of working on smoothing those out, I'm just going to call that part of my scoring that I'm going to do. So I'm going to carefully take this, and I'm going to turn this over just like this. Okay, and before I start, I'm gonna make sure this is nice and smooth. I don't have any major cracks. It didn't dry out too much. The inside looks pretty good. If you did have any cracks here, especially any small ones, you would want to go ahead and smooth those out, okay, especially on the sides. Okay, and I'm pretty excited because we talked about how your seam should be hidden, and I actually have no idea where my seam was at. So I'm not sure, it's hard to tell exactly where. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. I am gonna go ahead and double check this part here to make sure I don't have any cracks hanging out there. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and take this very carefully. I'm gonna flip it back over, and I'm going to place this onto my slab that I have here. Okay, and I have, of course, a ring that's coming around here, which is great. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark the outside part. I don't want to cut it yet. I am going to use our paper clip here, and I'm just marking. So it's like I'm tracing around the edge, but I'm not cutting it, okay? I'm just drawing here. Okay, I'm gonna move this over, flip this back over here. Okay, and on my ring here, I'm going to go around and start scoring this area, okay? Because we're gonna score and slip these two pieces together. Okay, so we're gonna get a little bit closer for this. Right here. Okay, so again, I'm going to take my, there we go. I'm going to take my paper clip here, and I'm just going to work on scoring all the way around here. So remember, that's like cross hatching. Okay, and I'm kind of overlapping things a little bit and making it a little bit bigger maybe than what I need. And that's just to make sure that I have it fully covered there. Okay, it's always better to do a little bit more than you need than too little. Okay, because we're going to be smoothing out the inside anyway after it's had a chance to kind of fuse together. Okay, so I'm kind of working back and forth this way, just like so. Okay, I'm gonna bring this in just a tiny bit more, just to make sure I have it fully scored over here. And then we'll work on the edge of my cylinder. Okay, and now I'm going to work on scoring the edges here of my cup. So remember, like I said, I already had some indentions from the lid accidentally. They weren't crazy disruptive to my cup, and I'm just gonna work with them so that I don't have to spend time trying to fix them, okay? When you're doing this here, you wanna be careful not to press down too hard because like I said, you know, our clay is still kind of soft. It's not fully, it'll hold its shape pretty decently, but if you're pressing too hard, you might mess it up. Okay, and we don't want to have to restart over. Okay, so I'm just going through and I'm working on scratching both sides here. And actually, I'm going to try out this one here. Let's see. Just for quickness purposes. Okay, so I'm going all the way around, not pressing down too hard. Just making sure everything is textured enough. Okay, remember it's important to score and slip exactly like we're doing here. If you don't follow these steps, I cannot promise that your project will turn out the way that it should. Okay, so I have my both of my areas scored. I'm gonna add slip to both sides. Okay, and so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at my container of slip that I have here. And whenever you're working with slip, this has some extra water in it to help keep it nice and soft because some of them are a little bit dry. I don't want it to be super watery. I also don't want it to be super thick like mud. Okay, I want it to be a little thinner than that. Think about like the consistency of paint or the consistency of like ketchup, right? Where it's not fully liquid, but it is definitely softer than this stuff right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of mix, just using my finger here. I'm kind of mixing through here to make sure that I'm getting the consistency that I need. Okay, and you don't have to do the whole thing, just work on what you need. Okay, so I'm going to take this, and I have a pretty decent amount here. Okay, or a decent consistency. And so I'm going to put this on both pieces, right? So we're going to look over here. I'm going to put this on here. And remember, whenever you're putting this on, you want it to be pretty gluey. Okay, you don't want to go sparingly with the glue. You want it to be pretty decent, because whenever you put these pieces together, you want to see a little bit of the glue kind of coming out of the seams or the slip, right? Making sure this is nice and mixed. And I'm just using my finger to apply this here. Okay, and it's okay if it's a little bit on the messy side, just a little bit, because having that is going to help secure it even further. Okay. So I'm covering this whole thing here. Making sure I have a good consistency, so not too watery. Okay, so this is pretty goopy, pretty good. Okay, and then I'm going to look over here at my piece right here, and I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, so I will come back here in just a second. I'm going to get this all nice and slipped up over here, and I will be right back. Okay, so both pieces are fully scored and slipped, and now I'm going to put them together. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully take my cylinder here. I'm going to turn it over. Okay, and I'm going to place it right on where I had scored and slipped. Now, one of the things that I want to do first is I want to carefully kind of press down. So I want to be careful about not squishing my cylinder, but I do want to kind of press down, and I'm going to kind of twist this a little bit to kind of secure it into place. Okay, so you want to make sure that you don't accidentally compromise your shape. Okay, but I want to kind of sink this into place here. Okay. Okay. That feels pretty secure. Okay, so I'm going to leave this to sit for a few minutes. So far, I've had some people who have not done this step. It is very important to make sure that you let it sit and rest, because it helps the clay start to kind of fuse together down here when it has time to set up. It's kind of like if you were gluing something and you used a lot of glue between two pieces of paper, and say that you wanted to hold your paper up vertically. Sometimes those two papers, they might start to slide because the glue hasn't had a chance to get kind of tacky or, starting to dry just yet. And we want to give our clay the same little bit of extra time. Okay, so we're going to wait about maybe 3 minutes or so. So I'm going to wait. Set myself a little timer here, looking at the clock. Okay, so I have 3 minutes going here, and I'm just going to let it sit. Okay, so while this is doing this, if I need to fix if there are any cracks, I can go through and do that. If I don't need to fix any cracks, I can kind of start working on my area. Maybe I need to clean up an area or something along those lines. I can use that time for that. Okay, so I'll be back in 3 minutes. Okay, so we have about 10 seconds left here on the timer. Okay. And all right, so I'm gonna go ahead and work back on my cup here after my 3 minutes. Okay, and you need at least 3 minutes. So if you end up taking like 4 minutes, that's totally fine because you were working on something else. or getting something else set up, that's totally cool. Okay, we're good to go here. I worked on kind of shimmying this a little bit. It feels pretty steady. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and first start with smoothing out the inside of my cylinder. Okay, so if you look in here, the lighting is terrible. Let me grab my flashlight. But if you look inside here we go, it helps a little bit. Okay, it's pretty goopy, right? If this light will help me out here. Okay, it's kind of goopy. And so we want to make sure that we're smoothing out the seams on the inside as well as the bottom. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you on the outside a little bit first, and then we're going to look at what the inside looks like. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I will be taking one of these wooden tools that is inside the kit on your table. Okay, there's a couple of different ends and there's a couple of different types. Okay, so these are all really great for this next part. Okay, you don't want to use something that's super, super sharp like this or super pointed just because we don't want to dig into the clay. We want to work on kind of smoothing it out. So you want to use the rounder edge. This one here has a round edge on this side. And this one does have a point here, but it also has this kind of rounded edge. So you might be able to use this one as well. Okay, so we're going to take this, and from the side view, okay, again, I'm going to start on the inside first, but I want to show you what it looks like on the inside. Okay, I'm going to start off with a little bit of some slip here. I'm going to work on kind of pressing against this. And I'm basically trying to smooth and seal this seam here. Okay, that's basically what I'm doing. Now, on the inside, though, it's going to be a little bit harder to reach that. And so you might have to use a brush to get down there, okay? Or you might already have a decent amount of slip, kind of depending upon how much you use to begin with, okay? But we're going to use a little bit down here, and I'm just kind of smoothing out the edges a little bit, kind of pressing in, and I'm going to smooth out the bottom as well, okay? So if you are having a hard time with this here, you'll want to use a tool that has a longer handle. Okay, so I'm just kind of smoothing some slip out here, and then I'm going to use my wooden tool to really kind of pat in those edges. Okay, and I'm going to probably switch back and forth between both edges here. Okay, but on the inside, I'm working on, let's go ahead and put this up. I'm working on just kind of pressing very lightly into both the side and the bottom, and then that corner. Okay, I really want to kind of smooth it out. And remember, we made that seam, our very first seam that we made when we made our circle here. We really worked on smoothing it out so you couldn't really tell that there was a seam there. Okay, be careful of those edges. So I'm bringing this around here. Okay, and this takes a little bit of time to get it all the way done. Okay, if you're working on this part here, your assistant can help with some of this preliminary cleaning up duties, right? So they might, start putting a couple things up if necessary. Okay. And then I'm going to grab a brush to really help get in those corners. Okay, so I have my brush here. I've got it loaded up with a decent amount of slip. And I'm just kind of working in, smoothing this out here. Okay, and again, you want to be very careful. You don't want to press too hard on anything, but you want to be firm enough that you're doing a good job of sealing it, just like when we did our first seam, right? Kind of have to find that Goldilocks spot there. Okay, so I'm just kind of working around these edges here. Just like this. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and use I'm going to use this one just a little bit, okay, to kind of help smooth out the bottom. Okay, and it's good to use something with a handle so that you don't accidentally mess up the edges or sides of your bowl, your container, your cylinder, your flower pot, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so I'm working on smoothing these out a little bit here, and now I'm going to work on the outside. So for the outside part, before I really get into this, I am going to use my paper clip here to cut around the edge. And what I want to do is I want to press straight down. I don't want to cut sideways. Okay, I don't want to come in at an angle. I want to go a 90-degree angle down here. Okay, so be very careful about this. This is a 90-degree angle. So I'm going to go straight down as I kind of work around here. Okay, and I'm going to see if this pointy end actually will go a little bit smoother for me. Okay, so I want to make sure that I'm not cutting into it. Okay, I want it to be pretty even with my existing cylinder. Okay, but for tools like this, whenever you're cutting, it does help if you can pull it towards you. Okay, so I'm doing this here, and I'm going to go ahead and carefully move this around. Okay, because you never want to push. You always want to, especially while you're cutting something, especially in this stage, you want to be able to kind of bring it towards you. Okay. And then we'll work a little bit around here. So remember, the main thing is we're removing what's on the bottom, not any part of the sides of our cylinder. Okay, so I'm going to bring this down here. Okay, let me go back over a couple of these areas. Right here. Okay, now I'm going to take this extra clay from the bottom. I'm going to remove it and set that aside. We're going to ball it up for the future. So we'll set this to the side here. Okay, if I have any kind of weird pieces, I can go through and kind of either recut or kind of peel them off, whatever feels like it will be the safest. Okay, and then I'm going to kind of start smoothing this out a little bit here, just like this. And right now I'm just kind of using my finger because I still have all of that excess slip. Okay, so I'm kind of, whoops. Watch out for your fingernails there. So I'm kind of smoothing this out here. Okay, and now I'm going to carefully make sure this wants to come up off of my canvas board, and I'm going to flip it over very, very carefully. So take this, both hands, go nice and smooth so that it's upside down like this, and I'm going to work on this seam a little bit more from the outside. Okay, so I'm going to use my fingers here to kind of work on this corner a little bit. Okay, now for me, this part of my clay seems to feel kind of dry and it's a little bit cracky, which of course crack is wax, so I definitely don't want any of that. So I'm gonna do a little bit of smoothing, and then I think I'm gonna take a little layer of slip around the edge. Okay, so I'm just kind of working on smoothing things out a little bit. Okay. So I'm gonna go in with my brush just a little bit. Kind of around the edges here. I'm going to go back to that seam a little bit more too. So I'm just adding some slip all the way around to kind of help rehydrate, kind of help set that seam a little bit more. Just like this. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and work on doing my first bit of smoothing. I'm going to use one of these ribs right here, and I want to use this flat side, not the rounded side. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of work in a downward motion here to kind of smooth down. And what I'm doing is I'm not really doing a ton of scraping. It is taking a little bit of the extra slip off. Okay, but my main thing is that I'm kind of working on smoothing out the side, and I'm just grazing upon it. So imagine if you're like, you know, shaving your legs or your face or whatever, right? You don't press down in order to make it work. You just kind of drag it along the surface of your skin, right? And let the blades do the work. It's kind of the same idea here. Okay, so I'm just kind of bringing this down here like this. Round this out a little bit more. Okay, I think I'm going to get a little bit of water to help me smooth this stuff out too a little bit more. Okay, so I'm bringing this down here. And I kind of have this ledge here. And I think I'm going to let it sit just a little bit because I don't want to get too crazy with this. I'm going to adjust this over here just to make it easier for me. And so I'm just kind of working on smoothing this out. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit to the side. Okay, and I have a couple spots right over here. So I'm going to feel like I'm doing a spackling job a little bit. Okay. Okay, so I'm really just focusing on smoothing this out. So I'm going kind of to the side, but I'm also bringing it down the sides of the cylinder. Okay, and again, we're not pressing super, super hard. We're just going lightly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and grab a cup of water so I can work on smoothing out a little bit more. Okay, so I have my cup of water here, and I'm just using it to kind of help me smooth out some of these areas. Remember, crack is wax. I want to make sure that's nice and pretty. Okay, and I'm going all the way around, and then remember, not only am I working around the corner up here, but I'm also bringing it down the sides. Okay, now an important thing whenever it comes time to store this, we absolutely don't want to store it with the bottom down. Okay, and that's just because sometimes this will want to get stuck to things. We want to kind of let it sit up here because it helps it dry a little bit better because it can get air on both sides. Whereas if you set it down on something, this will kind of seal against it, so it won't you might have issues removing it later. Okay, so we always want to dry this upwards like this. Okay, and so once I have my sides done and it's pretty smooth, I'm feeling pretty content with this. Okay, I'm going to do one more quick step and then I will be finished with step number 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully take my, oh my goodness, my project. I'm going to flip it over here. Always smoothing because you know how that goes. I'm just smoothing around this way like this, making sure everything's good to go because I don't want any cracks. Okay, I'm going to double check and make sure my sides are pretty good to go. Okay, and then I'm going to add a drainage hole in the very center of my cup. Okay, so in your toolkit at your table, you will have a straw, and what you're going to do is you're going to take your straw, you're going to find the very center of your container here, and you're just going to kind of work the straw kind of back and forth in a circle to kind of work through to the bottom. And the reason why I'm doing this with the bottom against this is because I don't want to accidentally press too far and have it cave in. If I were to have it with the end up, like I was just working on, I might have the issue where I accidentally press too hard, and instead of having the nice, horizontal bottom of this container, it would cave inward. Okay, and that kind of messes with the structural integrity of your project. Okay, so I got this clay right here. You can see, look at that little drainage hole. Okay, and before you finish, you want to take this here and you're going to kind of squeeze this clay out so that other people can use it, just like this. Okay, you might also have to take your paper clip and kind of circle this, because if this gets dry clay in it, then we can't really use it to make the drainage holes anymore because it'll be stopped up. Okay, so I'm gonna use this. I'll run a little bit of water through it and it'll be good to go. Okay, so I'm gonna take my extra clay, I'll set it to the side, and I'm gonna take this here and ball it back up. Okay, now for my project, because I did add some height to it, a little less than half of an inch because I added on that bottom, I am going to move this to a different location. Okay, so because this is too tall for my container now, I'm going to take my my flower pot that I have so far, and I'm actually going to be putting this inside of a Walmart sack here. Okay, so I'll turn this inside so you can see that. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to open my bag up here. Just like this. Okay, and so I'm going to take this and I'm going to carefully take my project here like this. Okay, and I'm going to set it inside here. And I actually think for this step, we are going to have it sitting down like this. Okay, after step 3, though, we'll have it the other way. Okay, so we'll have it, wrong side up, basically. Okay, so I have everything looking pretty decent in here. I am going to either do a small spritz of water in my, we'll do a small spritz of water. So I'm going to grab the spray bottle. So I have my spray bottle here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do 1 to 2 spritzes of water. Okay, so I'm going to have just a little kind of from far away. Okay, and I'm going to do another one kind of around this side here. Okay, and I don't want to do too much because I don't want this to get too melty or too slippery. Okay, so I'm going to take my bag, back this up a little bit here. Okay, so I'm going to take my bag, I've sprayed twice in here, and I'm going to take this, and what I want to do is, because I'm helping seal in the moisture, I'm going to kind of smooth this against the sides of my container here. I'm going to kind of turn this around here a little bit, and I'm going to carefully kind of tuck this in. Okay, so imagine if you were carrying something breakable and you're wrapping it up so that it doesn't break, kind of like that. So then there's not going to be a whole lot of airflow going on, and so my clay is going to be nice and sealed. So it'll still be workable tomorrow whenever I work on my next step. Okay, so this is step number 2.